completely agree with you. Ms. Dillon?
Oh, Cassandra, I'm really sorry. I'm feeling particularly dense this morning because
a good intro.
when we first had conversations about this, I thought I had it except for the item that we were talking about. But now I'm just totally lost, and I apologize. So, in relooking at the slides again, we have alternative 1 and alternative 2. Alternative 1 is salary only. Alternative 2 is salary plus incentive. So far, so good. Except salary only is divided into salary and salary plus maximum incentive. Alternative 2, which is salary and incentive, is separated into salary and salary plus incentive. Those numbers are dramatically different between those two slides.
Can you tell me which slide you're
I'm on
looking
the,
at?
I think 28
attachment
7
1, page 5,
Okay.
from McLaughlin.
from a Gloggin presentation.
Page five
So
and
you're looking at
5 and
28-7?
Pardon?
28-7?
I have this as a separate thing, so
Okay.
it's not in the.
But it is on the left-hand side. It says comp 28-7 and 28-8.
Oh, I don't have that
I'm
on my
helping
page.
you
I'm
out.
sorry.
I'm your wing woman. I got you.
Where does it say
So
that?
it's-
Oh
it's
yeah,
on the
mine doesn't
left-hand
say
side.
that. Oh, there it is, 28.7. Thank
No
you.
worries.
It's okay.
It's in the
Page 5
On
and
my
page
iPad,
6
it's a
too.
little bit smaller. So,
Oh, you're on alternative 1. You're
so
looking
let's take a look at alternative 1.
Okay.
So salary only.
Salary only.
Would it help if I just take a minute to walk through those slides? So I took the assumption that perhaps wrongly that this would be clear because we've seen this format before, but I didn't want to do that. It wasn't. Let me just walk through it because if there is confusion, it's probably because we went too fast through the slides.
Or maybe
Actually,
Dana, let Dana ask the question first so we don't answer
It
something.
actually would be easier because it's very difficult to hear you through the phone. I don't know if you're kind of muffled. So if Cassandra could do it, that would be better.
Maybe.
So, so if alternative 1 is salary only, why do we have the whole thing on the right-hand side that says salary plus maximum incentive?
Because salary and, you look at your total compensation as total compensation. And total compensation, what the value of a position is worth, let's say it's $100,000. You can pay $100,000 in two ways. You can pay it $50,000 in salary and $50,000 in incentive, or you can pay it just $100,000. So when we were looking at this, salary only, we want to target what the total value of the position is, not how it's paid. We're trying to target what the value of the compensation is for the position. Now, how do we want to pay that? Do we want to divide that up between salary plus incentive, or we just want to pay it all in salary? We don't want to ignore that a position that's worth $100,000 we don't want to just ignore that part of it's paid in incentive and say, well, we're going to ignore the incentive and only pay you a $50,000 salary for a $100,000 position.
Okay, well then if we're taking a look at that slide then,
Okay.
is your equivalent to the total cash, so take a look at under salary only on the left, under competitive market,
Well,
it's 172, 210, and 244.
Yeah.
But when you do salary plus incentive, it goes to 236, 312, and 375. So is that $100,000 position the 226, 312, 375,
Yes.
or is it the 172, 210, and 244?
It's the one on the right. Because what happened when we took the incentive opportunity out of this position and the general counsel position, we ignored what the value of the position was. We didn't say, what's the total cash that we should be targeting? What is let's just not even think about incentive and just set the salaries based on the salary only. The salary only with the competitive market and not look at the total cash. And it's the total cash that we should be targeting.
So then let's go to slide number 2.
Mm-hmm.
So we shouldn't be looking at the 172.
Yeah, the
We
172
should be looking
is
at the
just
236, 312, and 375.
right. Because that's the same on both, that's the total comp on both slides, alternative 1 and 2. That's the target that we're trying to hit. That doesn't change.
Okay. That helps. Then, going back to then 28-6, those figures don't match those slides.
So the salary plus incentive it closely matches what the total cash should be. And what Michael was saying when we went back and asked, why is the total cash lower in the
Now you're getting to my other question,
Yeah.
right? I don't want to go there yet.
okay,
And I'm thinking I might not even want to go there because
all right.
that's even. I'm just having trouble with the numbers this morning. So if we're trying to strive for the numbers that are on the far right hand side of both alternative 1 and alternative 2, why are those numbers so different from the numbers that are on 28-6? If on salary only we're trying to come up with 236.8 or say 237, this is now 245.
We're targeting the midpoint. So the midpoint on alternative 2 is 313 and the target is 312.4. So it's just rounding up. It's going to be very on the high end and low slightly. I'm ready. I took cold medicine. I can answer all these questions really rapidly now.
No, I get that, but I don't understand what you're telling me. And that's what's bothering me, and that's why I'm feeling particularly dense this morning.
So the midpoint positioning, we're targeting the midpoint of the salary range, and the midpoint of the salary range in our competitive market is $312.4 thousand. So salary incentive, the target is midpoint with salary and incentives $313,000 if they met their maximum incentive.
And we're just increasing the minimum
We're
from
well, you have
236
to you increase
from 236 to 255 or 245.
the minimum salary is for the incentive. It's misaligned a little bit on the page, I think, but the minimum for the salary only is 204, and then if you add the incentive, it's 255, and the midpoint is 250, and if they hit their incentive, it's 313, and the max is 296, and if they hit their incentive, it's 370. So it aligns up with the salary plus incentive. Are you saying that? And that's on comp 28-6. So the salary piece is lower, but if they hit 100% of their 25% incentive opportunity, that's what gets you to the maximum total comp, which is competitive with our peer group. And then on I don't know if you want to go to salary only, the salary only midpoint target at 300 is just 300, and it's lower than the 313 because the 313 represents the maximum opportunity. They might not achieve 100% of their incentive criteria. Most people don't. So there's an adjustment because it's lower because it's assuming that you're not, on the maximum opportunity on a salary plus incentive, you're not going to hit the maximum incentive opportunity. So your total comp in actuality could be lower than that.
So now go answer.
I answered
why,
that question regardless of I couldn't hold back. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I don't know if you can do any better explaining it to me this morning.
Can I try, and maybe if I'm not loud enough, someone else can
That's a lot better.
Yeah, it is.
restate
Coming
it?
through well. You're coming through well now.
Go ahead, Michael.
So I think the confusion is if you're on 28-7 under alternative 1, and these are the same numbers for CalSTRS on all pages on the previous page, but for CalSTRS, which is alternative 1, the minimum is 244.5, And over to the right, you see the market minimum is 236.8. So I think the question, I
There
think
you
we
go.
got over.
That
We
helps.
understand the 300 versus the 312. We understand that they're pretty much close. But the question is, why isn't the minimum? Why is the minimum so different? Why is the minimum 244.5 where the market is 236, and why is the maximum 355 where the market's 375? And the answer to that is that when we put this proposal together, is that what we are calibrating for, or our main objective, is to provide a midpoint that equals the market median, which is the 300. And then once we have the 300, we apply the usual CalSTRS range for salary range, which I think is like 18.5% or something like that. So we basically make we're focusing on the 300, and then we take the range above and below consistent with other CalSTRS salary ranges. So we don't have these really small or really tight ranges. The distance between the midpoint and the max is consistent across all CalSTRS positions. So we're focusing on the 300 and then calculating in the minimum and the maximum based on the usual range that CalSTRS have for its positions. Hopefully that's clear, or at least clearer.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to go back into the queue. Mr. Boykin?
Thank you. So first, the Treasurer's not a member of this committee, but I wanted to say the Treasurer shares concerns raised about internal equity issues, but also balancing that with the need to recruit and retain, and also the concerns about the arms race issue that Harry mentioned.
There you go. That's a good way to put
And
it. That's a good
especially
way to
as a steward of both systems, that's a concern. And I've come to learn there's no great solution that everybody's happy with compensation. It's always very complex in the public sector. But one question that I did have, since we're talking about competition, or not competition, but that we share the same labor market as our sister system across the river. I know there's differences in terms of the size of the offices and in terms of the sheer number of plans that CalPERS has and the number of evaluations they do. So I wondered, from staff, do you have a perspective on how we need to look at that when we're adjusting compensation? Or might there be changes that would grow our actuarial office that make us think, we need to hit a mark in the future?
Well, I mean, that's the complexity of this situation. It is apples to oranges in terms of the jobs, and that's why what's being presented to you is the market, not an arms race decision. I mean, this is just as we will later in the year do a full labor market study on all the positions in the work plan for the comp committee. That's really what you're looking at here too. So I think we want to keep our eye on the ball that this is really getting the right value on this position. But what happens, of course, is the same talent can do the apples or the oranges.
Right.
And that's where this gets to be, have some timing issues around that and how you decide to do that. But being true to the purity of the model, in my mind, you should not get into the arms race explicitly, but stay true to the market and focus on the market data that was being presented to you.
And in that respect, I mean, to me, clearly alternative 2 gets us to the midpoint of the market, but alternative 1 is, it doesn't lag that much in terms of the midpoints. So.
And just to add a little bit more, Grant, with regards to comparing us to our closest competitor, we recognize we're not the same. And actually, it's reflected, too, when you look at the CalPERS salary side by side with even the competitive market. They are even outside because, of course, they're being assessed by a different comparator group, more than likely. So.
Thanks.
I think, we haven't often provided you two approaches with or without incentive. I think we did that because we appreciate the angst around incentive structures, the angst around qualitative measures. Being the person that has to do many of those, I have that angst as well. So I respect that problem. But I think that's why we wanted to provide two valid approaches to you to consider that still target the market.
Ms. Ortega?
Just two more questions. One, so to make sure I understand, the 25% was chosen to make the numbers meet the midpoint, not for any other reason, considering that the other staff have a 15%. And then one question, Jack, you mentioned we're going to be doing an overall salary survey for all positions, right? For all the
Yeah, we've lagged for some time doing that market study, so we put that in the work plan. That's for the investment staff primarily, but the general counsel's position would be in that as well. And you just recently did one in my position just last meeting. So we're catching up on the rest of the investment staff and the general counsel position later.
Okay, so
In the spring of 17, that'll be done.
the actuary position wouldn't be part of that study again, too?
Not really. I
I'm
wouldn't.
only asking because if it were, then I would say, why are we doing this twice? Is my question.
Well, I wouldn't think that the data would change in a few months, to be honest.
Yeah, it wasn't our intention to put that back on the table.
Anything else, Mr. Ortega? Let me ask, item on the option alternative 2, the incentive is at 25%. If it was 20%, do you think it would meaningfully make a difference in what we're trying to accomplish? And then that would bring the midpoint at, instead of going to 313, it would hit right at 300, right? And
Yeah, but what you're doing then is, that's still assuming they achieved 100% of the 20%. So the 300 you'd really be bumping the midpoint. I mean, you're dragging that down.
right,
Does that make sense?
that's the assumption that they would get the maximum of 20% of 250.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I don't know if there's any other questions. We've kind of had a lengthy discussion and comments about it, and I'll indicate that I'm most comfortable if we're going to take action would be around alternative 2, and my gut tells me that incentive should be 20%, not 25%. And although it plays a little bit with the, as Ms. Licknock had just said, I think my comfort zone would be at that level. It's higher than what's afforded other people who are not in the investments. It's not as much as is being asked. It still moves the total compensation, I think, quite significantly. It should be able to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, which is to retain a mission-critical position. It does it with extensive discussion and questioning. Anybody have any other questions or comments? Anyone want to? I think it's procedurally I'm not able to move the item. Is that correct? So someone from the committee would need to make a motion for Ms. Vargas.
I don't understand the 20 versus 25%. Is it just more of a perception?
There are other employees that receive incentives, and
they do 15.
Their maximum is 15.
So it's like the midway.
It moves a little closer to internal equity around from my perspective, and it's not externally. It may have a adversely affect getting to that midpoint, but internally it sends a more powerful message for me towards internal equity. So it's trying to balance the two. I mean, I'm not going to die on the sword on that, but I'm putting it out there as an idea.
I have a question, and I know Michael's on the phone still. When we think about adjusting the incentive portion, is there an appetite for then looking at the base salary adjusting?
If it helps, just on that question, and I have a spreadsheet, and appreciate that you all maybe aren't with your calculators. If you reduce, this is just another option to consider. At the 20% opportunity, if you, instead of adopting the 250 salary midpoint, which is what's presented to you, you adopted 260, then the total cash opportunity would be 312. Another alternative, which in my mind would give you better alignment to the other staff, would say a 15% incentive opportunity, and the salary midpoint at 270 would give you a total cash of 310.5. So I know I said that quickly, and you probably weren't
Oh, we got
prepared
it.
to.
270 at a 15% brings us to 312. 260 with a 20% brings us essentially to the same spot. So you gave us three alternatives, if I'm correct, Michael. You gave us one at 270 at a base with a 15% incentive, brings us to 312. 260 at 20% brings us to 312. And the one that's in front of us, 250 with a 25%, brings us to 313. Both, they all three options ranging in 15% in comp to 25% in incentive comp, and a base of 250 to 270 all land in the 312, 313 range. Cassandra?
Just a comment, and I appreciate that additional information for you to consider. If you do, adjust the incentive opportunity to 20, I would really encourage you to keep it around 20, 25%, only because the competitive market is. That's what I want to be in line with the competitive market. I appreciate the internal equity piece, but we want to make sure that we're competitive so that we're not having to come back and adjust again, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, as people that implement the policy, I think, yeah. So it'd be 260 at 20 brings the salary to 312, potentially, with reaching the maximum 20%. Ms. Vargas?
So does it matter in terms of retention of talent when they're looking at these positions, the 20 to 25%, or is it the base salary? Because I think that's the piece that I'm trying to figure out.
It's the total.
Total.
Because-
So if we had a base salary and then we had the 20%, somebody who's really, who we would be able to get good talent based on them.
I believe so.
Is that a motion?
Yes, that's a motion.
I thought I heard a motion in there somewhere, Ms.
Yes.
Vargas. So it was been moved by Ms. Vargas, seconded by Ms. Hendricks, to adopt a compensation for this position at a base salary of $260 with an incentive of up to 20%, a total comp of $312. Any discussion on that?
Can I get clarification that that's at the mid-range and that the minimum and maximum would be adjusted reflective of that
Yes.
Adjustment?
Yeah.
That's exactly what I said.
Alternative three.
Alternative
Alternative three.
three. As
is our style. We always create a new.
you have that? Okay, great. Any discussion on that? Comments? Seeing none, we can vote on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so the motion passes with an abstention by Ms. Ortega. The motion passed. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Michael, if you're still on the line.
Thank you, guys. I'll disconnect now.
Thank
Okay.
you, Mike. Thank you so much. Okay, brings us to item 5. Ms. Norcia?
Yes, so this item has been before the committee a few times now. If you recall, I just want to remind the committee that this is not an item that was motivated by staff. It was actually... he's not here. Thank you, Arena. So it was something that was brought up during one of the committee sessions by a board member that it was during the associate portfolio manager classification, setting the salary and the incentive opportunity, and the committee taking time to address it and then review and approve it. And so with that, we did appear in April with a proposal, and at that time, Harry did ask that I, myself, and staff go back and come back to this meeting with recommendation. And so you have before you recommendations on what staff is asking for you to consider. We did carve out and preserve for the committee those areas that we heard from some of the board members were important. For example, the compensation philosophy, still having authority over setting the peer group, definitely setting base salary and incentive opportunity. And at the last session, that was something, Ms. Ortega, you brought up a question about the incentive opportunity, which was carved out of this recommendation. So really what you have in this item, we can, if you prefer, we could, if you like, we can go through the recommendations, or if there's
Why
questions.
don't we go right to questions? Before, we've had this before, so, Ms. Dillon?
So I have questions on 3 of the recommendations. Let's start with the last one. Approving expenses that exceed limit amounts.
That's
Should-
actually not the last one. The second to
Oh,
last
second,
one.
last one on that page, how's that?
It's on the next one.
The relocation policy?
Yeah, the relocation policy. So, would it be prudent for us to set a percentage limit of what that can go above the amount before it comes to the board, or just wholeheartedly?
What I can share with you is just historically, from my understanding, the CEO has not had to come to the committee for expenses that do exceed, and we've had some relocation expenses that have been within the state rules, as well as the additional component of $15,000, which is set in the comp policy. So again, I don't know what the amount could potentially be for an area that the CEO would have to then bring before the comp committee. I would ask, what level of comfort you would have with regards to delegating that.
So right now,
excess.
the limit is 15,000?
That's on one portion of it. So right now, the CEO has discretion with approving the other items as well, even tied to the state rules for excluded staff that we follow.
So it's considerably more because you're paying for a
I was
broker.
going to say, that wasn't very much.
No, that's just for some additional expenses. This covers brokerage fees on sales of houses, and since we're talking often about California employees, you can imagine what that is. So particularly on a Los Angeles home, or San Francisco home. But bottom line is, I just reinforce what Melissa said. This is a very theoretical item. In 14 years, we've had nothing exceed expenses, and probably the number of relocations we've done, I would say, is like 5 in my 14 years. So this is just a small issue from what we would say.
And does that ever get reported to us, Jack?
It has, and because it just follows administrative expense guidelines.
Okay.
I'd be glad to do that, but they're few and far between.
Okay.
But it's real money too. Of course, the policy allows for real money. I just want to make sure it isn't. You don't have a de minimis view of that, given what California real estate is like.
Yeah. Then the 4th bullet from the top about the performance evaluation scale. We do the CEO, CIO on 7. I think Jack and Chris are now using 7 points also. What's the rationale for going to something that would be different?
The 4th bullet down.
The 4th bullet down.
Personal performance evaluation scale. They're set on a 7-point scale. There is, from my perspective, no thought to change that in the near future. But if there were a situation where it could go to a different point scale, that would give the CEO delegation to change it.
Again, the scale that's used for Chris Ailman and myself is a totally different structure.
No, I understand
that you
that,
designed,
but-
yeah. This one has been designed through our human resources offices under Melissa, and it's rather elaborate, actually, the scaling instrument, to say the least.
It's just the tool to calculate that 20% on the statutory positions.
Right.
I mean, not all of them are 20% anymore, but it's just that. We were at 5, we changed it to 7, and then there was a combination of both. So that's pretty detailed stuff to bring to the committee on how we're going to, adjust the calculation tool.
And it
With
is
persons that we don't have any evaluative.
Right.
and that performance scale is in alignment with the other leadership performance reviews we do, separate from those that you have authority over these positions.
Already. And then the benchmarks for asset classes.
Yes.
Set or adjust performance award scales and benchmarks for asset classes.
So as an example, we had PCA and Makita here that opined on item 3 that you approved. That speaks to those situations that occur. It's been mentioned at the committee meetings, when these are brought up. These are things that are just coming from the investment, sometimes, not always, coming from the investment world and then being implemented in the compensation policy, and it requires your approval. So that's what that piece speaks to for performance scale changes,
So one of the
qualitative and quantitative changes.
So one of the things that we talked about was taking a look at the whole investment incentive program. If we approve this, that wouldn't necessarily even have to come to us. That would just be done, and we might not even know about it. Not that that wouldn't be reported out, but it's entirely possible that that would be done and it wouldn't be reported out to us, correct?
Correct, if that's what you choose to do so. That's what you choose. There is a piece in here, further recommendation that if it's delegated to the CEO, that he would still be prudent in utilizing the investment and the compensation consultants for the assessment and analysis of changing anything relative to the performance criteria.
Speaking for me, I find great value in the board, or at least the investment committee, having those types of discussions, and even having that discussion here in compensation. So I'm not really sure that I'm ready to delegate that responsibility. But with your explanation, I think I'm okay with all the others. So thank you, Melissa.
Okay.
Ms. Ortega?
I agree with Ms. Dillon's comments. I think I was looking at this sheet, and so towards the bottom, it's the B, C, and D that are moved over into the revised delegation that I would recommend not be moved over and be left in to be before the comp
Ms.
committee.
Ortega, which number is that on?
It's on page comp 31.
Yes.
And it's under incentive plan.
Right.
And so
That would stay within the committee.
The three adds to the delegation.
So that's,
Right, set or adjust performance weightings, set or adjust performance award scales and benchmarks, set or adjust personal performance evaluation scale. Isn't that exactly what we talked about in the item 3?
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree that we should continue to have those conversations here.
So that would go back.
That
to
would
the
stay
first
with,
column?
they would stay with
It
us.
would go
That would
with-
not be delegated
first
to the
column would go
CEO.
Board authority.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Anything else, Ms. Ortega, on the list of items there that
No,
you think should be
I was
retained?
comfortable with the relocation expenses being delegated. I'm not sure that I would want it coming back to the committee either, only because it feels like personal information that,
Right,
can I just clarify, because
sure.
you pointed out D, which Dana, that was the response. That's the scale that we use for the personal performance. I just want to make sure that the D is the set or adjust personal performance evaluation scale that we just touched on, and it seemed. But I want to make sure that.
So is D only related to the CEO CIO evaluation then?
No, it's this.
I
No,
guess
this would be non-CIO CEO.
So let me say what my view is, and then you can tell me which of these is the right. The issues we discussed about the benchmark weightings under the RMS discussion, I believe should remain with
Okay.
if this is outside of that and more technical, then I'm fine with putting it
Okay.
into the delegation.
That would be B and C then.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else, Ms. Ortega?
No.
Mr. Boykin?
Thank you. Again, the treasurer's not part of this committee, but I just wanted to chime in and say that I agree. I'm fine on D, but for B and C, I think certainly the investment committee has always had a lot to say about those weightings, and then about the benchmarks we choose, and then also in terms of setting the weightings between qualitative and the various quantitative portions has been important. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Boykin. Ms. Dillon?
I'm okay with it. Never mind.
So I just want to touch on number 2, because we do in the new work plan coming for this fiscal year,
Is that the market pay
salary
analysis?
study. So
Referring to comp 31, number 2?
I'm sorry.
Market pay
Yes,
analysis
yes.
review? Okay.
Right now, we would return in September with an item to say, we want to initiate a market study. More than likely, you would approve that for us to go and move forward with that. This proposal is adding that the CEO would have delegation to initiate that kind of behind the scenes, so we wouldn't necessarily have to come before the committee in September or November, I believe, to request that we initiate the study. I just want to touch on that with the committee right now to make sure we're clear.
You want to come on to that, Mr. Morgan?
Yeah, one point on that is, to me, it's very important that we set the comparator group and nothing is proposed to be changed in that delegation. But, there have been times historically where we're pretty certain because of what's going on in the market that there's no stomach to change compensation. So I guess maybe if there's a reporting when the study is going to be initiated, I'd feel more comfortable.
And my
There's
suggestion,
cost.
my suggestion would be that the CEO would work in concert with the chair of the compensation committee. If in fact we were to do that, the CEO would work with Ms. Dillon to make sure that at least the chair of the committee knows that work is going on behind the scenes. Ms. Dillon?
Yep, I'm good.
Go ahead, Ms. Garcia. Was there anything else?
No, I just wanted to
Okay, thank you for that.
clarify that part of it.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I have a point of clarification.
Yeah,
with
Mr.
regard to
Bartow.
Your last statement, Mr. Keeley. Would you like that in the policy?
Yes.
That the CEO would work in
Yes, it
coordination with
should
the
be
chair of the
explicitly
company?
stated. The folks that are here currently know what is intended, but people that would come to follow would need to refer to that and have that in the record, in the policy, so it's clear. So whoever's in those seats knows that that's what the direction was.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, comments about this item? Oh. Ms. Norcia or Ms. Lukens, can either one of you clarify what we have explicitly stated that we want to now delegate to the CEO and those items that we want to retain at the committee level?
My understanding is it's the it's what was recommended here for the updates for the delegation of authority to the chief executive officer, with the exception of item 4 on Comp 31, subsections B and C.
With the exception of, correct, yeah.
And that other addition that we just spoke of, that Brian brought up. On number 1. I'm sorry, number 2. Number 2. Number 2. That the CEO will consult with the chair.
Right, the market pay analysis, that will be. Any other, Ms. Dillon?
Move approval as amended.
It's been moved and seconded to approve with the amendments that were stated. All those, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, the item passes. A review of information requests.
Let's see. I'm not sure if this qualifies, but Chairperson Keeley, you did ask that staff provides a document that shows the positions that the committee has authority over as far as compensation, setting compensation, and then compare that to what CalPERS salary ranges are.
Correct. And I also want to explicitly request analysis on the general counsel's compensation relative to externally competitive marketplace, as well as being consistent with a philosophy of internally equitable compensation relative to the decision we made at item 4. So some analysis on that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, the general counsel one will be in our broader labor market study. Did you want it as part of that or something different?
my intention is that we would see it sooner rather than later. So however we would see that sooner. So if it could be done separately at a minimal cost, Jack, that would be great. If, the intent is for this committee to see it and to see how we're doing relative to the labor market, externally competitive. We got analysis for that previous position that we just approved with a lot of comparison to CalPERS.
Right.
I'd like to have something comparable that speaks to the general counsel.
Okay.
Harry, we don't have a meeting scheduled for September, so it's for November, so I don't know.
Right. Anything if we were to act upon any decision, it wouldn't be anything that would take effect until next year anyway. So I don't think we're jammed up with timing.
No, I was thinking about the labor market group. We have to go back and look at what was the labor market comparison group. It's not so much the CalPERS thing, obviously.
Yeah.
We know what they pay.
Yeah.
It's the labor market group that was used last time. I didn't know if you wanted to look at that and make sure that's what you want. That, to Grant's point, normally that's when we do the broader labor market study, we would check in on that. But we could repeat what we did before in terms of the. Yeah. I can't remember right now what we used. That's the critical issues.
So why don't Dana and myself we'll have a little offline conversation and figure out what we want to do. I think the intent is clear. It's really around being externally competitive and internally equitable. Right. Given the decision that this committee made, which I think was the right one, to attract and retain talent in a mission-critical position. I view the general counsel in an equally mission-critical position, and I want that to be explicitly stated on the record in this organization that, at least from my perspective, internal equity is extremely important. So we'll work behind. We'll do that.
We'll go back.
So
and check
I appreciate everyone's work on this item or these items for the committee this morning.
I have a question.
Ms. Dillon, you have a question.
How do I get removed?
I'm going to go ahead. Ms. Dillon.
I just want to make sure on our last item, there was policy attached that already had changes made, that the changes that we made to that recommendation then get changed in the policy also.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the next item is the agenda for the next committee meeting. As you can see, we're not scheduled to meet till the fall. Is that right, Ms. Machia? So it's pretty self-explanatory. Dana will be chairing the committee. I'll be vice chairing the committee. Dana gets the extra stars today for taking on this responsibility. Appreciate that, Ms. Dillon. And the intention is was stated at our previous comp committee in April. We really don't, as a committee, we don't see a need to reinvent the wheel so much right now. We feel pretty comfortable that any changes, adjustments, modifications that we want to make can be done relatively in an expedited fashion without significant expense to the committee or the system. So that's kind of what we're thinking about for next fiscal year. Ms.
The only thing I was going to ask was the language on the draft agenda. It refers to a labor market benchmarking for statutory positions, and I was wondering if that was what you were referring to, Jack, when you're talking about the labor market stuff. Yes. So that's already that's on the agenda. So
yeah, it was a check-in with you on the labor market comparison. Yeah.
Okay.
And I just want to clarify: would that be removed with the delegation that was just approved today? Right, the initiation of it.
Say that again.
So in November, we were going to present to the committee and get approval that we were going to move forward with the salary study. I'm asking, do we need to do that given the delegation that was granted to the CEO today? We would initiate it and come back in April.
Come back in November.
And the CEO will communicate and work with the chair of the committee to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. We're good. You okay there, Jack?
Yeah, I'm not. Are we saying that we're not discussing the benchmarking, that we're just proceeding with the prior benchmarking group? Is that?
Well, Yes, I mean, that was the plan, is we were going to be using we have two different comparative
Yeah.
groups,
But
one for
we-
investment and one for administrative positions.
Okay,
And
okay.
so, but we can, since we're going to be discussing it with the chair and vice chair, if there's an appetite to reevaluate the peer groups, then we would bring that to the group. If there's no appetite to do that, then we'll just initiate the study with what we have.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
a little offline conversation with the chair and the vice chair will, make sure the road is very clear for the months ahead. It's been a long morning already. Any comments from the public? Thanks to the staff and the consultants that worked on this. Appreciate it. Meeting's adjourned.